So you're ultimately running three separate businesses and your third one is your fund. What were the regulatory challenges that you had to start your own fund?
Yeah. I mean, looking back on it now, we absolutely have no idea what we were getting into. The fund literally came about because we started consulting. We're like, okay, cool. We have a bit of cash now. We started the accelerator. And then after we started the accelerator, we're like, we should probably start a fund so we can also participate. That was how it came about. Honestly, the license and everything was pretty smooth sailing in terms of getting that. We had a BCFM license, which is designed to be a streamlined process and easy for emerging fund managers to get. The regulation is not as much as some of the other licenses. There's some limitations to it. But I think if you're just starting out, and actually most funds would qualify for against all of the restrictions. I put that in air quotes. I don't think they're that much restriction. I know most funds would be fine.
And you and Craig were running your first fund for the first time. How challenging was that in terms of fundraising itself, since you didn't have a track record to lean on?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the most frustrating part about fundraising was that we've been in the startup ecosystem for a long time, managed programs, helped startups and entrepreneurs for both of us a very long time. And we have an established reputation ecosystem. And obviously, after running the muru-D program, we had experience with choosing stars that get invested in, the whole investment process and kind of managing that. But in the ecosystem, there is just this thing that it's not your track record unless it's actually your money, your funds that you've actually raised. That's what counts as your track record. So when we were starting out, we were thinking about size of the fund, and basically the advice that we kept getting was just raise a small fund, do it quickly, deploy it quickly, show that you had a first fund, and then go on and raise your second fund, and then you'll have a track record. So that's what we did. And I'm glad that we did that because I feel like we had no idea what we were doing. We were learning on the job for sure. Like everything from the whole paperwork process, legal, accounting, to even just pitching LPs, being comfortable with answering their questions. And I think for me, that was a big thing that I was really uncomfortable with was pitching to potential investors in our fund because in my mind, I guess I have this idea that these people with a lot of money and you just instantly start thinking about power dynamic and you just get into kind of a negative space and then you start stuttering on your words and the whole pitch just ends up messed up. So for me, that definitely took a lot longer than I think it took, right? To get comfortable with. But yeah, I mean, fundraising is definitely a whole different skill set, a different process. And especially fundraising for a fund is completely different than your fundraising for a startup or getting a grant or things like that.
What's interesting is that you said before that selling a fund was quite similar to selling Chanel. Why is that?
I think it goes back to selling something that you're passionate about. The reason that I enjoyed selling Chanel, I mean, well, it's Chanel, like, you know, that's enjoyable. The other part is I'm a competitive person. And so if I could see that my targets and my numbers are really high, then I get even more motivated. And then I think also when you're working in beauty, as an example, or fragrances, I think you kind of realize that the best sales come from when you get. Nobody wants to feel like they're being sold to, especially when you're going in to buy something like makeup. But not everybody enjoys it. They kind of feel a bit vulnerable. And if you can go in and just have a chat with people, they can feel comfortable. You end up selling a lot more. I mean, one of my biggest sales, it was this guy who came in and nobody was paying any attention to him because he was a minor. So he was like, he didn't look like someone who would be art function out, right? So nobody was really paying attention to him. And I just walked up to him, was like, hey, do you need any help? And it's Christmas time. So the opportunity for the biggest amount of sales here. And he's like, yeah, I'm looking for something for my wife for Christmas. And I'm also looking for something for this year. Oh, okay. Well, what are you looking for? He's like, I have no idea. Just like put together a package for me. I was like, do you have a budget in mind? No budget. So obviously I put everything in the box and created two of them. And he just like bought it and walked off with it. And I was like,
Done.
yeah, done. So I think that's kind of something that I learned back then. You want to make people feel comfortable and you got to be passionate about what you're selling and never underestimate people as well. You never know where it's going to come from. And when you're doing the fundraising for this fund, I think I totally forgot that. I got really overwhelmed by these are men, typically men who have a lot of money, and I'm not confident in anything to do with financials. So if they do ask me a finance related question, I'm not going to be confident responding to it. It was completely out of my comfort zone. But I think when I kind of realize, and I think the other thing as well is, and look young, they're generally a lot older as well. So there's a big confidence thing there too. But I think I got over it because, well, first I got comfortable with the whole fund thing. I wrote out a whole script of what I say during calls, like all the bullet points, we need to make sure I have all of the answers. I'm fully prepared. And I have to say, in a code as well, like I would have never been able to do this in a real life meeting, right? You can't just carry all the notes and use script in there. But you can in a COVID world, right? Because you just have another window open and you just keep moving between the screens. So that really helped me. And then I think the second thing was just being comfortable with who I am, because I realized that if they don't want to invest in the fund because, I don't know, they have an issue because I look young or whatever like that, that's not my problem. That's their problem. And this is a long-term relationship as well, because the life of our fund is 10 years. So if they have a problem with that, they don't like me for whatever reason. I just have this thing about people liking me. I always want people to like me. If they don't like me, then, oh well, they weren't a right fit for the fund. They would have never come in it. And so not to take it so personally.
You mentioned before that most of the people you were meeting were men. Did you feel that that lack of diversity had an impact on what you were doing?
I don't know. I think it's a hard question. I mean, I get that a lot, especially when people say to us, wow, your accelerator program, we have one of the highest rates female founders in our portfolio if you're looking across funds of this nature. And they're like, do you do anything special? Or do you think that female founders come to you guys because you're a female founder and you're the co-founder of the organization, or CEO, and they come? And I was like, honestly, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I hope that for people who do feel like it's something that they conscious about and they do see, especially young women who've worked to get into the whole VC and startups, they can see that there are other people in them if that is something that they need in order to motivate that. But it's honestly not something that I've really looked around. It's like when we were getting into the whole VC space, I didn't look around and say, okay, are there other women in there? I was just kind of in it. And then I realized, oh, I'm the only woman at this conference. Okay. Like it didn't consciously think about it until I was in the scenario that, yeah, I realized. Yeah.
That's really interesting for me because I was speaking with another founder of this social enterprise. He won the most prestigious social enterprise award by the UN, which was also run by former President Bill Clinton. He said after they won, and he's Malaysian, it's a pure Asian team. After they won, the next year there was a surge of application from Southeast Asia because I said, for the first time we see Asians winning, so it's possible we could actually apply. So it's very interesting because for him, he never even realized or thought that that could possibly have any impact whatsoever. I actually did.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, at the very least, even though I'm not consciously thinking about it from my perspective and looking for, I guess, other female role models in the space, if other people are, I hope that I'm setting a good example and encouraging them to be part of the space as well.
Another thing I wanted to talk about was your deal flow. So you target pre-Series A companies in any industry. What do you mean by pre-Series A? Who are you looking for?
Yeah, the startup world has some funny definitions. I mean, C could be anything. There could be anything. Essentially, what we're looking for are startups that have traction. So typically, they've got revenue coming into the program, got users at the very least, the people who are actively engaging product or service. The founders, some kind of deep domain expertise in the areas they're working in. Our entrepreneur and resident national secrets. They have secrets. There's a reason why they're doing what they're doing. The other thing is that the why. Why are they doing what they're doing? So the stage that we're investing in is obviously so early. Anything could happen. I think the founding team is probably the most important. part of the decision-making process for us. We're looking at application. Apart from the skill set, why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they so passionate about it? Especially when you see someone who doesn't have a background in that industry and is running a business in that industry. You start to think, okay, why? What are they going to, like, what do they know that people in the industry don't know? And how are they going to be the ones that are doing it if they don't have those industry connections or any kind of knowledge? The other thing is the founding team itself. So do all the founders in the team have kind of the skill sets required to run business? Like, do they complement each other? Similar to Craig and I, how we're complete opposites, we're looking for that in our team as well. And then the other thing is the relationship. How do they know each other and how long have they known each other? If things get difficult, are they going to be able to have those tough conversations with each other and they'll come out on the other end of it as founders, friends, or whatever? Sometimes family members see a lot of husband and wife teams well, great program. So yeah, the team is the biggest part about it. Coachability as well. So I mentioned how stand-up works. Obviously, if you're not coachable and willing to receive feedback and you're going to go into the entrepreneur and residence one-on-one sessions, mind and accelerator programs probably not for you. Are you going to give back to the community in some way and you're going to really be part of the whole accelerating Asian community too?
Is social impact something that you look for at the very start, or is it something that comes in after?
So this is something that I learned when we were running the muru-D program, is that the whole social impact space, despite it being woke and inclusive, all of those words, is not. There are so many things that exclude people from being involved in it. And one is just that if you're just looking at internship programs as an example, right? You need to be of a certain financial position in order to do an unpaid internship in a country like this, right? If we're just looking at that, like inclusion, but it's also all the acronyms that are being used. It's really difficult for people to understand how they can get involved in the whole space and what it all means. I mean, if you just look at measurements as one substep to the whole impact space, it is so confusing. Nobody knows what they're doing. There's no standard for it. Everybody's doing their own thing. So it's a very exclusive place. And so what I learned at muru-D when we were running that program is that there were actually a lot of social entrepreneurs applying to startup programs. And they were coming from the perspective of just working on solving a problem in their home country or their home city. They weren't thinking about social impact, even though social impact is oftentimes embedded into the business model itself by nature of the problems they're solving and the business models that they've created, but also by nature of where we are in the world. In Southeast Asia and in South Asia, there are so many problems that need to be solved, and entrepreneurs are at the forefront of solving those problems. So all we need to do is find these entrepreneurs and then teach them about the whole social impact space.
So how do you find these entrepreneurs? It's a fourth cohort now. You have 10 for each cohort, and out of the 10 is from just over 200 applications, but your touch points around over 2,000. So how do you even get that many options in the first place? You have very interesting startups from like Bangladesh and Pakistan as well.
I think it's a couple of things. One is obviously the networks that we have before we've brought them over. Obviously, we've been in the space for a long time. The reputation of us as individuals, our team as well. We come from all kinds of different types of programs, different parts in the world. Find these entrepreneurs. Actually, the number of applications increased. We get on average at least 500 per cohort. So now, fun fact, we have an acceptance rate that is harder to get into than Harvard. A 2% acceptance rate. Well, it's got to do with a lot of our networks. It's got to do with our alumni as well. I guess similar to what you were saying about women or people seeing someone in positions they'd like to be in or a startup program they'd like to be in. And startups in Bangladesh see that we've invested in companies from Bangladesh. And so they apply to our program. Same with Pakistan and same with all of these other places. So that's one thing, having alumni from these countries. We have a lot of investor partners as well in these markets. So they will refer in companies that they're currently working with, or they would think are a good fit for our program. And then obviously all the traditional ways of marketing, so social media, webinars, and things like that as well. And in a world that you travel, we would that we'd be out in pretty much all of these places all the time.
Given that we're speaking 2021, obviously we can't travel as we used to. I mean, what other ways has COVID impacted your space and what you're doing?
Last year, there was definitely a slowdown in terms of investing. A lot of the angel investors or individuals stopped investing. They wanted to conserve their cash, especially everything was going on the stock market at that point in time. So a lot of the angel money kind of dried up. And when you're looking at the institutional capital, that also kind of dried up because they were focusing on supporting existing portfolio companies as opposed to the so last year was a tough year to be fundraising. And it also was really difficult for startups who, across all industries, who were impacted by things like the lockdowns, the lack of travel, as an example. Many startups in the travel industry, not necessarily bad companies. They could have been really, really great companies, but it's just a matter of timing. And they just happen to be in the wrong place, wrong time. One thing that maybe COVID did do is the whole idea of profitability for startups in terms of a lot of investors were starting to ask questions about the business model and at what point is startup going to become profitable and taking that into consideration a lot more with their investments as opposed to before. Obviously, we've seen a whole WeWork story, a whole bunch of other stories where when you've got cash flying around, really easy in a way to kind of make those investments.
Another thing that you are doing is that you are the host of your own podcast, Doing Good podcast. How did the whole idea come about and how does that play into what you're doing?
Yeah, honestly, it was a hobby. I started it because while I was working for UN Women, meeting all of these really incredible, inspiring people from the grassroots level, all the social entrepreneurs we were working with, but also top down, looking after corporate partnerships, you get an idea of how different types of organizations are looking at social impact, CSR, and diversity, all of the people within the organization are trying to drive these gigantic shifts to like different directions. And so originally it was meant to be a blog. I wanted to interview all these people and just like, I get excited about talking to people. I like writing, but I'm just very conscious about all the words that I'm putting to paper. I feel like when people read a blog, they're very critical about the exact words that are being said, how the information is being presented, as opposed to a podcast. You can kind of have a really casual conversation and it can be a bit more in the moment. So that's how the podcast came about. Started off as a hobby, literally just me loving talking to people and putting it out on a platform. But yeah, the whole idea is to kind of explore different ways that people can create social impact or how different people think about social impact. So the idea, many people that I meet, especially when I was working for UN, you're so lucky you get to create impact as part of your job. And that's when I realized actually everyone can do it. There's so many different ways to incorporate it as part of your day-to-day life. And so that's kind of why I wanted to profile lots of different people doing that.
The creator economy is on the rise. And it seems as though everyone is some kind of a creator. You have got like Justin Khan and Gary Tan, they're all VCs, they have their own YouTube, they have their own podcast. You've got A16Z, they are creating their own media empire. How important is it for, say, those in the VC world to be content creators themselves and be known and heard?
Well, I think it depends. I think it's important for everybody.
Even for founders as well, they should put themselves out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it depends on how you look at it, right? If everybody was just to create something, just put out a whole bunch of crap into the world, I don't think that really benefits society in any way, right? But it depends on why you're doing what you're doing. Like I'm doing my podcast because for me, it's a hobby. If people listen to it, then great. If not, then it's a project for me. I enjoy talking to all these people. I'm learning a whole bunch of things. I hope they are too. I don't know. But the reason that I started it was selfish and it was for me. Like that's why I was doing it. And so I had no expectations about, oh my God, the website has to be perfect. Like I need to produce as many episodes and all that kind of stuff. I need to edit all of this, edit all these episodes. And when I first started, I was like really obsessive about all of those things. But then when I went back to it, I was like, at the end of the day, I'm doing this for me. And so just make it easy for myself. So yes, I think that people should create. Should they create YouTube channels, podcasts, blogs, pieces of art. I think they can express themselves in different ways. And not everyone is going to be a thought leader in their space, but they don't need to be. They can contribute and create other ways. And it doesn't need to be public.
You were involved in the Payments Race Money Asia 2020. Yeah. How did that happen? I found your blog on YouTube and it looks like a lot of fun. You were racing through Asia and you could only use your credit card.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, you've done a lot of research. Yeah, so the payments rates is part of the Money 2020 conference. And basically what it is it's kind of like a mini amazing race. And each competitor has a different payment method and they can only use that payment method throughout the entire race. So I had credit card, there's also gold, Bitcoin, cash, and mobile payments. And not only do you have to travel around, but similar to Amazing Race, you have to do like tasks and get points. And they usually get paid. How did I get involved? And I don't know. It was like completely random. I got a phone call from my friend one day and he was like, "Hey, the Money 2020 race is on. Would you like to be considered for a competition?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay."
How do you find the experience?
If I had to do it all over again, I totally would. It was a lot of fun. It put me completely out of my comfort zone. It was terrible timing, though, I have to say, because I had a big work trip in the US right before it. So it was like 2 weeks in the US. It was also time that we had a lot of stress because we knew that the muru-D program was coming to an end. We were planning out what was going on with Accelerate Asia. So it was just a lot of stress that went into it. I was also doing my master's at that time, and it was exam time. I had 3 assignments that I needed to submit. And so I landed back in Singapore for like literally 5 hours, unpacked all my stuff from the US, and then started the race. I was jet lagged the entire time, and I was trying to finish my assignments while doing the race. Timing was not great. I'm definitely do it again. I learned a lot about myself. One was that I can push myself, obviously, to a certain limit for short periods of time. The other was I used to, before this race, and it's ironic because I travel so much, but I used to get really nervous about traveling, especially traveling by myself, because like I'm going to miss the flight. They're going to stop me at customs or whatever, and I'm going to be interrogated. I don't know. Like I just always had these kind of worst case scenario things going through my head. And during a race, you obviously don't have time to think about these things. You just like competitive, try to meet all of the stuff. So yeah, it got me over that pretty quickly. But it was just fun. Like it's something completely out of who does that, right? If anybody asks you, just say yes.
Do you feel that having gone and done so many different things that you have found your why?
I don't know if I've fully found it, but I feel like I'm getting closer to it. I know in my heart that I am so passionate about creating change and enabling other people to do that. And in particular, just reducing inefficiencies. I think when you look at the nonprofit world, I always get annoyed at it because of obviously all the things going on there, the bureaucracy, funding, all that kind of stuff. And then you look at the corporate world and I get really annoyed at that because it's just like purely for one purpose, profit driven, and often at the expense of everything else. But I think there's a fundamental issue, and that is that when people think about business, they automatically think that it's a bad thing. It's like, where did that concept come from? Why is business a bad thing? Business actually has the most amount of impact. If you're looking at just bringing people together in communities or employing people. So yeah, I'm really passionate about finding more sustainable, scalable ways for creating.
Or what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I've been thinking about that a lot because I've started another side project, which is recording videos for my future self, maybe my children or whoever in 100 years' time wants to watch my videos. They can do that. But legacy, I think, haven't quite figured out what that is. I know I want to make a mark on this world in some way. I know I don't need recognition for it. Like if I'm looking at success, becoming famous or anything like that, it's not on my priority list. But I think knowing that I did something good and I left the world in a better place.
And what do you think are the most important qualities of a successful person?
Ooh, adaptability, being willing to change from myself. Obviously, I've changed a lot in terms of literally all the careers that I've had. If you look at my resume, I probably wouldn't get hired from the organization. She jumps around too much. She never stays in one place. Yeah, I think adaptability is really important. In particular, like right now, our world is changing so quickly. If we just look at COVID as an example, how quickly that spread around the world, how quickly everything changed in terms of doing business, forming relationships with people. I think it's a huge skill set that should not be underestimated, and probably something we need to encourage each of our kids in some way, because the world is only going to change a lot quicker. These technologies are the accelerating. And then apart from adaptability, I think the other thing would be just being willing to learn.
And where can people go to connect with you, find out what you're doing, and also accelerating Asia?
So for Accelerating Asia, if you're a startup that wants to go through our program, you could check out the application form and everything there as well. And if you're an investor that wants to invest in these startups, come talk to us as well. We're happy to give you deal flow. We're also on all the socials. For myself, you can check out Doing Good podcast stuff. I also have my own website. I'm also on all the socials. So